Today's case is taking us to Naples, Florida. In September 2009, deputies walked into a quiet home to perform a routine wellness check. A dedicated, hard-working mother hadn't shown up for her shift at Publix, and her family was panicked. But what law enforcement found inside that house was a crime scene so horrific, veteran officers would later describe it as the absolute worst of their entire career. Because before the police even stepped foot over that threshold, before the world even knew that the 32-year-old Guerline Damas and her 5 young children had been brutally murdered, the man responsible was already in the wind. He had boarded a flight at the Miami International Airport and fled to Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Today, we're discussing the devastating loss of the Damas family, the terrifying detail of Mesac confession, and the bizarre 8-year courtroom circus that delayed justice.
This video discusses themes of domestic violence, intimate partner abuse, and murder, which may be distressing. Viewer discretion is advised. The information presented in this video is based on public records, news reports, and official press releases available at the time of recording. All individuals mentioned are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This video is for information, education, and advocacy purposes only. Do not show hate to anyone.
Who were Guerline and her children? To truly understand the weight of this loss, we have to talk about the victims. Guerline was 32 years old, and by all accounts, she was the absolute anchor of her family. She was a deeply devoted mother to 5 beautiful children: Mishka, Marvin, Maven, Megan, and 11-month-old Morgan. Guerline worked at the local public supermarket, and her coworkers loved her. She was known for being reliable and fiercely dedicated to providing for her babies. She was a woman who showed up. Guerline was doing what so many women in the diaspora do, working tirelessly to build a stable, loving life for their children, while secretly carrying the unimaginable weight of a violent household behind closed doors. When a tragedy of this magnitude strikes, the question isn't how it happened, but how did the system let this happen? Because Mesac did not just snap out of nowhere. Well, according to records, deputies had been called to the Damas a handful of times since 2000 for domestic disturbances. But the most horrifying warning sign came just 8 months before the murder, on January 2nd, 2009. Guerline made a desperate 911 call that day because Mesac became extremely violent toward her. He slapped her so hard across her face that the infant she was holding in her arm actually fell on the floor. Mesac was taken into custody that very day, and he was charged with misdemeanor battery. So the abuse was officially on the record. Law enforcement know now there is something going on behind closed doors of that house. Unfortunately, this is exactly where this system usually fails these families that are in crisis. And arrest was made, that's great. A report was filed, excellent. What else? What other long-term intervention that they made for those families, for that mother, for Guerline and her 5 children to escape that monster, that prison, to escape it safely? Rarely do we hear that these women made it out alive. Not only Guerline had to deal with that monster, now adding the cultural layer make it even more difficult. Okay? In the Haitian culture, there is a deep pressure to keep the family unit together at all costs. They raise us with that unspoken rule. Sak pase nan kay, rit nan kay. Ça veut dire, what does that mean? What happened in the house stays in the house. So the stigma of divorce, the fear of judgment, and the terrifying prospect of having to raise 5 children by yourself can feel more dangerous than that abuser that's sleeping in the next room. You know what? The abuser knows that. They know about that cultural silence and they weaponize it to keep the victim silent and isolated. Guerline was doing everything she could, everything in her power to protect herself and her babies. However, when you live with a man that has documented history of violence toward you that span multiple years, the responsibility for survival should not only rest on you, on the victim. They should have a safe exit plan for those people. Anyways, by September 2009, that systematic failure reached a devastating breaking point in Guerline's house. On September 17, 2009, inside of their home in Naples, Florida, Mesac Damas carried out an unimaginable act. The details disclosed in the Florida Supreme Court document are extremely disturbing. It stated that Mesac tied Guerline up with duct tape and stabbed her so brutally as she fought back for her life that the murder weapon, the knife itself, was actually bent. After that, he went around the house looking for the children, and he found the 3 boys, Mishka, Marvin, and Maven, and he also brutally murdered them. But court record revealed an absolutely sickening details. It says after killing the first 3 children, the boys, he actually paused. He took a break. I guess brutally murdered 4 people take a lot of energy, right? Anyways, he stopped and parked his bag to flee. But then he realized that if he left his 2 younger children, his mother-in-law would get custody of them. And he said that he didn't want that. So he went back and murdered the 3-year-old Megan and 11-month-old Megan. What a monster. You won't believe that. Instead of facing what he had done, Mesac drove to Miami International Airport, boarded a flight, and fled to Port-au-Prince, Haiti. It wasn't until the next day, when Guerline missed her shift at Publix, that the horrifying discovery was made. As soon as the police identified Mesac as the suspect, it triggered a massive international manhunt. He thought he could go to Haiti and use it as a hiding place. Well, guess what? He was wrong. On September 21st, just days after he murdered his wife and his children, Haitian police just worked with the FBI and found him sleeping in a car that was parked outside of a guest house in Port-au-Prince. Then he was arrested immediately and extradited back to Florida. And upon his return to Florida, rather than showing an ounce of remorse, you know what he did? He started making excuses. He shamelessly told reporters that the devil, can you imagine? The devil made him do it. In a twisted attempt to shift blame, he even said Guerline's mother cast a spell on him and put voodoo on him. And that's why he butchered his wife and his children.
The Naples father who murdered his wife and 5 children was forced to listen again to his confession nearly 10 years ago.
She was like trying to make noise with her feet that the neighbor next to us can hear.
Prosecutors used Mesac Damas' own words against him, describing how he killed his family in the worst mass murder in Collier County history. NBC2's Risa Morris is live outside the courthouse as his attorneys make a last-ditch effort to save his life.
This was attorney's last effort to persuade the judge here. The prosecutors going for the death penalty, while defense attorneys are pleading for Mesac Damas's life. As Mesac Damas sat with his head down, stuffing tissues in his ears to block out the sound, prosecutor Amira Fox recounted Damas's explanation of the murders in his own words.
I went upstairs with a knife in my hand. They were all sleeping there.
This is all from an interview Mesac Damas did with Collier County detectives after he slit the throats of his wife and 5 young children.
Duct tape. I pretty much put it around her mouth and everything. There, she won't scream.
Prosecutors chose to read this interview to prove to the judge that these murders were especially brutal. That's one of the reasons the state is allowed to ask for the death penalty in this case.
He enters with a weapon, kills his wife, and then slowly and deliberately moves through the house, killing child by child.
But the defense was fighting for Damas's life, while Damas sat silently, refusing to speak a word to his attorneys or the judge.
You obviously have someone who was very, very troubled and likely has significant psychiatric problems. In this country, we do not execute mentally ill individuals.
Damas's defense attorney trying to disprove the state's argument that these murders were cold and calculated.
He's clearly not sitting and contemplating what he's doing. He's doing it in a craze, in a panic.
You would think, with a full confession and overwhelming evidence, justice will be swift, right? Absolutely not. Because Mesac Damas dragged this family through an 8-year legal circus. For years, he played games with the court. He stalled trial, he cycled through attorney, he demanded to represent himself.
Thank you. I would like to represent myself, please. I'm 34 years old, and I have the right to represent myself.
In one court appearance, he even stuffed paper balls in his ears, okay? Inside of his ears, so he won't have to hear the judge. He even told the court that he should not be tried because he was a new creature in Christ. Well, if you look at him from the video that I'm going to play, he looks like a creature in, all right, but not a creature in Christ. More like a creature in the devil.
It is one of the most bizarre and notorious murder cases in Collier County history.
Grab Jesus in my life, and I'm saved. I'm saved.
Today, a judge ordered another competency evaluation for Mesac Damas.
I'm going to see my Lord. Whatever happens for a reason. God knows everything about us.
Mesac Damas admitted to killing his wife and 5 children. Now he says he doesn't want a trial because he doesn't want family members to see the gruesome pictures from that horrific night 8 years ago. NBC2's Risa Morris was in court today as Damas asked to end it all and be executed.
His wife and 5 kids were all found brutally murdered at this North Naples home back in 2009. And after 8 years of legal proceedings, Mesac Damas is asking to get this all over with.
I want this thing to be done as soon as possible. You know, I don't want a trial, and then especially I don't want my family to be involved in this.
Damas is charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder. He's facing the death penalty, and today he asked a judge to let him represent himself, plead guilty, and be executed.
What do you want to be sentenced to? Death?
Yeah,
You want to be sentenced to death?
His reasoning is that he doesn't want his family and his wife's family to see the photos from the bloody crime scene.
Enough is enough. I don't want my people to keep crying, you know, when they hear about this case, every time they see me on TV.
But the judge did not agree to Damas's demands. Seems like we're almost back at square one here. Today, the judge asked for 2 doctors to evaluate Damas to determine if he's competent. This has been done many times before, and depending on the results, we may be back at square one in this case.
He's going to be assessed by 2 doctors between now and the next court appearance. And to some extent, it depends on what they say. If they find him to be incompetent again, well, then everything's on hold.
Damas and his attorneys will be back in court for a pretrial conference in August. As of right now, the case is still set to go to trial in September, whether Damas wants to or not. In Collier County, Risa Morris, NBC2.
counts of first-degree murder and 6 years without a trial. Tonight, it looks like we may have to wait even longer for an accused family killer to be put on trial in Collier County. Mesac Damas was charged with the murder of his wife and 5 children back in 2009. He's even confessed. So what's the holdup with the trial? And what is that holdup costing you and other taxpayers? 4 in your corners, Carl Fortier, working to get you those answers tonight. Carl?
The length of time it's taken to bring Damas to trial may be especially surprising since he has admitted to killing his family in their North Naples home 6 years ago. But since a guilty verdict could send him to death row, a challenge to Florida's death penalty in another case could delay his case even longer.
I have 11 grandchildren. Now I lost 5 of them. I lost 5. Why?
This was Mesac Damas's father's reaction 6 years ago while mourning the loss of his son's 5 children and their mother, Guerline. After fleeing to Haiti, Mesac Damas was eventually captured and brought back to Collier County, where he admitted to killing all 6 of the victims. He has sat in the Collier County jail since then, going through one court-appointed defense attorney after another, in a case that seems to attract legal problems. His current attorney says the delays are not uncommon, given that the state wants Damas to pay for the savage crime with his life.
There isn't a death penalty case around that wasn't a lengthy trial.
At a case management hearing last week, defense attorney James Ermacora argued that since the constitutionality of Florida's death penalty is currently being challenged in the U.S. Supreme Court regarding another murder case, any trial for Damas should wait until that case is decided.
And then the Supreme Court of the United States says that Florida's death penalty scheme is unconstitutional for whatever reason. You can imagine the wasted resources in having to do it over again.
The Supreme Court isn't expected to make a decision on the death penalty until next summer. This week, Collier County Judge Frederick Hart signed an order granting the stay of trial, in other words, delaying it. And the Supreme Court angle may not be the only delay. The whole case may have to eventually move. Last week in court, there was discussion that the trial may need to be held outside Collier County. Ermacora says all the local media exposure could affect potential jurors.
If everybody who comes in says, yeah, I've heard about it, it's a terrible crime, and there's no way I could be fair, we may get halfway through and say, look, there's just no way we can get a fair and impartial jury here.
In the meantime, Damas sits in a jail cell. Since he can't pay for an attorney, taxpayers are funding his defense and his detention. The Collier Sheriff's Office says that it costs $107 a day to house an inmate in the jail. For Damas, that adds up to about $214,000 since 2009. In Naples, Carl Fortier, Fox 4, in your corner.
Finally, in the fall of 2017, Mesac Damas ran out of excuses. All those excuses that he was using to stall the whole process finally went poof. His time was up. He was then forced to plead guilty for the brutal eradication of his entire family. And then after that, they gave him 6 separate death sentences and sent him straight to death row in Florida.
Sentence could be handed down as soon as this Friday in one of the most gruesome murders in Southwest Florida history. It was September 17th, 2009, when investigators found 6 victims murdered inside their Naples home. 32-year-old Guerline Damas and her 5 kids as young as 3. They were all dead. Her husband, right there, Mesac Damas, admitted to killing them all. And now the courts are trying to determine if he'll get the death penalty. NBC2's Risa Morris was in court today where Damas's attorney begged to save his life.
This is the last chance attorneys have to plead their case to the judge before she decides Damas's sentence on Friday. The state here asking for the death penalty while the defense attorneys are trying to save Damas's life. All of this while Damas himself has asked for the death penalty. It was an emotional day in court as the uncle and brother of the victims took the stand.
Something was taken from our family that day, not just my sister, her children, but our hope and happiness of what our family used to look like was gone.
Mesac Damas admitted to murdering his wife Guerline and 5 kids, Mesac, Maven, Marvin, Morgan, and Megan, at their home in 2009. His youngest child was just 19 months old. He slit their throats with this knife, which the prosecutors showed in court today. You can see the knife is bent from the murders.
I saw each of their smiling faces flash before my eyes, knowing that I would never hold them again, play with them, or see them grow up and create their own lives.
The point of today's hearing was for each side to try and convince the judge to side with them when it comes to punishment. The state wants the death penalty in the case, while defense attorneys are hoping for life in prison. The defense attorneys brought an expert on religion and Haiti today who testified that Damas believes he was possessed through voodoo when he committed the crime. The expert went to Haiti to meet with Damas's family members and see where he grew up. She said voodoo was a big part of his childhood.
In his view, this is the devil, and the devil has been operating on him to do these things.
Damas's former brother-in-law not commenting on the sentence that he wants to see, instead choosing to use the time to remember his older sister and 5 nieces and nephews.
I don't want my sister's legacy to be a domestic violence statistic. I want people to know who she was to me and my family and what she could have been to this community.
Damas and attorneys will be back in court tomorrow for closing arguments, and then the judge says she has some questions she wants to ask Damas.
Guess what? The emotional roller coaster is over.
Finally, after 8 years of bizarre court hearings.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. The new world comes, so therefore my faith.
The man who murdered his entire family will go to death row.
Mesac Damas committed the most gruesome murders in Collier County history. He slit the throats of his wife and 5 children in their North Naples home back in 2009.
U.S. Marshals tracked Damas down in Haiti. Today, justice was finally handed down. Tonight, NBC 2's Risa Morris talked to the family of Damas's wife, relieved it's finally over.
Guerline Damas, July 21st. Zach, September 9th. Maven, July 15th. Marvin, August 28th. Megan, March 21st. And Morgan, February 9th.
8 years later, the family of Guerline Damas and her 5 children are choosing to remember the day they were born instead of the day they died.
For on these days, our family will celebrate the lives that came into this world, and these dates are far more important to highlight that the day these lives were lost.
Their killer, Mesac Damas, sentenced to the death penalty for the brutal murders of his wife and 5 children at their home in 2009. Today, he sat silently, stuffing wads of paper in his ears so he didn't have to hear what he had done.
The death sentence is reserved for the worst of the worst homicide cases or murder cases. This was certainly one of those.
This case has been moving through the Collier County court system for 8 long years. And while it's finally all over today, the family of the victims say they want this day to be about Guerline Damas and her 5 children.
Guess what? The emotional roller coaster is over. It is finally time for the dear angels to rest in peace.
In Collier County, Risa Morris, NBC2.
Years after the brutal murders of a Collier County mother and her 5 children, the confessed killer, her husband, the kid's dad, has finally been sentenced.
41-year-old Mesac Damas, the husband and the father of the victims, was sentenced to death this morning after pleading guilty to those crimes. 4 in your corner's Carl Fortier in court when the sentence was read. He has the reaction from the victim's family tonight. Carl?
Well, the brother of Guerline Damas and uncle to her 5 children says nobody wins in this situation, but after 8 years, his family finally has some closure after a judge has decided that Mesac Damas should get the death penalty.
The emotional roller coaster is over. It is finally time for the dear angels to rest in peace.
McKindy De, referring to his sister Guerline Damas and her 5 children by her maiden name. All 6 were brutally murdered in their North Naples home in September 2009 by Mesac Damas, Guerline's husband and the children's father. Today, Damas kept his head down as he learned his fate.
First-degree murder of Guerline Damas. The defendant is hereby sentenced to death.
Damas confessed to using a knife to kill his family, but the case has dragged on for years due to multiple courtroom outbursts, defense attorney changes, and other issues. Damas's attorneys had argued for a life sentence by raising doubts about his mental health, but prosecutors convinced the judge the murders were planned.
The heinous, atrocious, and cruel quality, the cold, calculated, and premeditated quality which made this case the exact type of case that was contemplated when Florida decided to have a death penalty.
After Damas was let out of court, the relief for the De family was evident by the tears and hugs in the hall.
Choose to remember our family for what it was and always will be. A family of love, a family of strength, a family of honor.
And as with any death penalty case, this one will be followed by an automatic appeal in the Florida Supreme Court. In Collier County, Carl Fortier, Fox 4, in your corner.
After 8 years of torture, justice was finally served in the courtroom. But the loss of Guerline, Zach, Marvin, Maven, Megan, and little Morgan is a void that can never, ever be filled. To my Haitian sisters watching this video today, the biggest lesson we must take away from Guerline's heartbreaking story is this: silence does not protect your family. It only protects your abuser. We are so often taught to endure, to just pray it away, and to worry about what everyone in the community will say if our marriage fell. But the fear of judgment should never, under any circumstances, keep you trapped in a violent home. If someone is hurting you, walking away is not failing your children. It's probably the only way you can save yourself and them.
If you or someone you know is facing domestic or dating violence, you're not alone. The National Domestic Violence Hotline offers 24/7 support at 1-800-799-SAFE 7233 and text support by texting START to 88788. The service is confidential, safe, free, and available in over 200 languages. For individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing, support is accessible through video phone at 1-855-812-1001. Please make the call.
Thank you so much for being here for Guerline, Zach, Marvin, Maven, Megan, and Morgan's story today. Please drop a purple heart in the comments to keep their memory alive. Remember, check on your sisters, trust your instinct, and know that our community is only as strong as the women we protect. And if you believe in shining a light on these crucial stories, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.